Dominic Cole stepped into the glass lobby of Sterling Group, holding a simple bundle of crisp white flowers in his arms, his 6-year-old boy tucked closely behind him. He was just covering a shift, his old work jacket still damp from the morning rain. Violet Sterling, the CEO, stared at him. She only saw the worn soles of his boots. She coldly signaled security to throw him out, refusing what she dismissed as a cheap charity gift. But remember the smallest gestures. When a tiny card slipped onto the floor, her whole face shattered. A note written by her late father. Trust the man who carries these flowers. Don't look away, because that little card is about to bring an empire to its knees. Let's go back. Dominic's phone alarm buzzed at 5:15 that morning, just like every other day. He killed it before the second ring, swinging his legs off the couch he used as a bed, and stood alone in the dark apartment. He listened closely for the back room, absolute silence. Little Levi was sleeping. He had another hour. Dominic padded softly into the kitchen and started making coffee. While it brewed, he checked the small stash hidden inside an envelope taped behind the kitchen cabinet door. $43. Rent hit on Friday. Today was Tuesday. He had already grabbed an extra shift at the florist this week, with another lined up for Thursday morning. But Thursday feels like a lifetime away when you're gripping $43 and dreading Friday. He carefully hid the envelope again and started Levi's breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast. He watered down the last drops of orange juice. Levi never seemed to notice, and Dominic had finally stopped beating himself up over it. The boy quietly ate whatever was given to him, never complaining, always remembering to say thank you. That tiny act of gratitude made Dominic feel like a good dad even on heavy mornings. His phone rang at 6:42, right as Dominic was pulling on his second sock. It was Marcus from Petals and Green, the local florist 3 blocks down, where Dominic worked his part-time sorting job. Marcus sounded rough and completely sorry. Derek called out sick. I need someone to run a Sterling Group delivery before 9. It's a prepaid order sitting in our system for years, special instructions. The client who bought it passed away last year. His attorney set it all up on a timer. Today's the big day. Dominic slowly looked at the clock. He stared at the back room door. He had absolutely nowhere to leave Levi, his neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, was at the doctor, and their usual teenage sitter was stuck in class on Tuesday mornings. I can do it, Dominic replied, but my boy comes with me. Marcus hesitated. It's the Sterling Group main tower, Violet Sterling's personal office. I know the place. Another long pause. Okay, but Dominic, whatever you do, do not lose that card. The lawyers were dead clear. That note must reach the CEO's hands directly. Dominic scribbled the address on a faded gas receipt, then went to wake up his son. You and I both know this wasn't some standard flower arrangement he usually sorted. Normally he handled cheap grocery store bundles, loud reds and pinks shoved into crinkly cellophane, the kind of panicked gift you buy when you forget a major anniversary. But this was different. Pure white flowers perfectly woven together, a quiet, masterful gesture carrying an enormous amount of weight. Such a tiny detail, a dark blue ribbon double-knotted not once. Right at the center, carefully tucked away instead of just attached, rested a tiny ivory envelope. Its silver wax seal bore an unfamiliar shield shape carrying a hidden meaning. When Dominic grabbed the floral arrangement from the shop's back room, its physical weight held a surprising gravity. He carried the bouquet with immense care, exactly how he once handled sensitive calibration reports at his former job. Those vital documents where one tiny misread line could cause absolutely massive, devastating consequences for someone. Little Levi pulled his heavy winter coat on, right over his pajamas, simply because Dominic had zero time to fight that little morning battle. The young boy snatched his favorite tiny toy car off the dusty entryway shelf. The battered red one missing a back wheel, a treasured comfort object since age 4, now safely hidden in his pocket. Are we going far? Levi asked quietly. Not far, downtown. We're going to deliver some flowers and come right back. Do flowers like the rain? Some of them do. Levi pondered this small fact. I'll hold the umbrella. Father and son walked 2 blocks, huddling under the bus stop shelter as heavy rain washed the city streets. Dominic shielded the delicate corporate flower delivery beneath his jacket as best he could, one arm protecting the fragile blooms, his other hand holding Levi's. Not one complaint from the boy about the freezing dampness or the brutally early morning. He quietly clutched his toy car, studying the forming street puddles as if those tiny ripples held the deepest secrets. Meanwhile, on the 37th floor of the Sterling Group Tower, CEO Violet Sterling had been wide awake since 4 in the morning. She honestly hadn't slept well. Deep Rest vanished 14 months ago when her father died. This massive supply chain empire was dropped onto her shoulders, like a crushing weight on a fragile, already bowing shelf. She was only 27 years old yet, running a massive corporate logistics conglomerate valued at several $100 million. She excelled at the job but carried a profound bone-deep exhaustion, the kind no amount of normal sleep could ever cure. Her loyal assistant, Hannah Price, was already stationed at her desk when Violet walked in at 6:30. A quiet gesture a full hour before her scheduled start. Hannah had the daily briefings printed and perfectly sorted, marking the most dangerous crisis with a tiny yellow flag. Let's look closely. That yellow flag meant an 11 o'clock board meeting. Connor Blake, the company's ruthless CFO, he'd been aggressively pushing a partial operational sale to a massive outside investment group. He claimed the financial data demanded it, swearing there was simply no other viable path forward. He spoke with that terrifyingly smooth, measured arrogance of a powerful man who had never once been told he was wrong. And that specific subtle trait in Connor was quietly unsettling Violet, in deep ways she couldn't even put into words yet. She sipped her bitter coffee by the window, watching the tiny, intricate movements of the vast city below. Deep in this building's 40-year history, on some forgotten morning that surely felt just as gray and heavy as today, her father made one monumental choice that completely saved their family business. He quietly confessed it once, hidden in a private letter he never even mailed. A forgotten note Violet discovered tucked in his desk drawer right after his funeral. His neat handwriting read, "The choice that cost me the most was always the one I avoided the longest." She had studied that single heavy sentence countless times, yet its deepest meaning still completely escaped her. A simple flower delivery was the absolute last thing on her racing mind when the lobby called. The massive Sterling Group corporate lobby was specifically designed to make everyday people feel entirely insignificant. You and I see it, cold marble floors, towering glass, and ancient potted trees meant to dwarf any simple human gesture. Picture this, a front desk built of pale stone. Guarded by 2 women in dark blazers, they perfected that tiny, polite glance that instantly dismisses a person. Dominic pushed through the heavy glass doors, right at 8:41. He paused inside, shaking the cold rain off his worn jacket with one free hand. He protected the delicate bouquet in his other. Little Levi trailed behind, instinctively shrinking against his dad's side. He stared up at the massive corporate lobby with wide, cautious eyes. The receptionist at the desk finally looked up. Her face stayed blank. It was that micro-expression proving she had already judged his worth. "Can I help you?" "Delivery for Violet Sterling, prepaid order from Petals and Green. All deliveries go straight to the second-floor mailroom. I have strict instructions to give this to Miss Sterling directly. This is personal, not a standard order." The receptionist shot a tiny, heavily loaded glance right at her coworker. Just a subtle little look proving they dealt with this every day. Guys walking in with no appointment, dropping big phrases like personal item and specific instructions. Men with decent faces but wearing the wrong worn shoes. Then, Mason Reed stepped out from the left hallway. The head of security, broad shoulders, moving with that heavy, slow confidence of a guy who always knows he is the largest man in the entire room. "Sir, do you have a scheduled delivery time?" "No. They said this was urgent. It must reach the CEO before 9 o'clock. Mason gave a tiny warning head tilt. "Who said that?" "The flower shop. This is a priority order booked way in advance by I am going to need you to step toward the doors while I verify this." Levy quietly shrank behind his dad. One receptionist whispered a single word. They stared at the kid, scanned Dominic's damp jacket, and traded glances again. Just a tiny sharp exchange of judgment, ending with a very small, shared smirk that they didn't even try to hide. A pack of men wearing expensive suits swept past without offering Dominic a single glance. A woman clicked past in heels, phone aggressively jammed against her ear. The glass doors spun behind them as a guy in a plush coat strutted through. Everyone greeted him by name. He caught the elevator without missing a single step. Dominic just stood frozen, gripping the delicate flowers completely rooted to the floor. You know kids catch everything. Levi heard the receptionist mocking folks demanding to see the CEO. He clearly heard her drop the word audacious. A big word he didn't grasp, then came pathetic, which he understood perfectly. He shoved a small hand inside his pocket, gripping his tiny toy car tightly. A soft ding, the elevator opened, revealing 3 people. Hannah Price speedwalking while clutching a tablet, and Connor Blake wearing a sharp charcoal suit. And Violet Sterling, leading by a deliberate half-step, projecting that intense energy of a woman whose time meant far more than whoever stood in her path. Her eyes caught the flowers first. A massive shift sparked deep in her eyes, a microscopic flicker you'd miss if you blinked. Then she spotted the tied ribbon and that little ivory envelope tucked inside. She just kept walking. Send it to the mailroom. She tossed the command out, aiming it at nobody and absolutely everybody at once. Dominic simply stepped forward. Miss Sterling, I was hired to hand this right to you. The shop stressed you must read the card before. I do not accept random flower deliveries. Her tone wasn't cruel, it just carried an absolute finality. Whatever the occasion, whatever the sender intended, I do not accept them. I am sorry you came all the way out here. Connor Blake shot Dominic a tiny, highly amused glance. The CEO's time, I know it is valuable, Dominic said, keeping his eyes on Violet. I only need a second. The person who set up this delivery is someone you actually knew. The instructions were incredibly specific and arranged over a year in advance. My only job was to make absolute sure this tiny card reached you. Let us pause here. Violet finally turned around and truly looked at him. Taking in every detail, his soaked jacket, the quiet kid, those white flowers gripped tight. She searched his face, finding something entirely different from what she had anticipated. Mason, she whispered. The guard stepped up, placing a heavy hand on Dominic's arm. It was not rough, just a firm grip, but it was enough to shift the bouquet. The small ivory envelope slipped free from the ribbon. It flipped once in the air, landing perfectly face up on the cold marble. Levi moved before anyone else even twitched. He crouched, scooped it up and offered it to his dad, but Violet noticed the smallest detail first. The silver wax seal pressed perfectly into a small shield. Her face froze. She recognized that tiny seal instantly. It was on every single document her father had ever mailed to his lawyer. On every private letter left in his desk, on the back of tiny cards hidden in her old birthday gifts. Slightly off-center but never fully missing the mark, it was his seal. Charles Sterling's personal stamp. Stop, she commanded. Mason instantly dropped Dominic's arm. The massive lobby grew dead silent, the way a room shifts when a powerful leader suddenly changes their entire tone. The 2 receptionists at the front desk froze completely. Connor Blake's expression shifted into a carefully neutral mask. Hannah took one tiny step forward. Violet crossed the floor to where Levi stood, gripping that small envelope. She stared at the boy, then at the tiny card in his hands, before looking right up at Dominic. Watch closely here. She took the envelope, her hands remarkably steady as she opened it. She snapped the silver seal cleanly in half, peeled the flap, and slowly unfolded the single sheet of paper. She read the few words in total silence, then she read them again. The room was so quiet you could hear single raindrops hitting the glass. Trying to sound totally reasonable, Connor Blake spoke up. It could be a fake. People pull off these small scams. They research corporate leaders, copy old signatures. It is not a forgery, Violet interrupted. Violet spoke softly, yet those few words carried immense weight. I know my father's handwriting. The note was incredibly short. It read, Violet, if you are still angry, stay angry for later. But first, trust the man carrying these flowers. She folded the tiny piece of paper against her palm. Dominic watched her small reaction, choosing to say nothing. He had no clue what that little card said. He still did not. He only took the gig because Marcus needed a quick favor to cover a delivery. He needed the hours. The alternative was sitting at home, counting his last $43. Now look at this picture. A powerful CEO clutching a note from her dead father. And Dominic realized this tiny delivery had just sparked something massive, something he could not even begin to understand yet. Who are you? Violet demanded. My name is Dominic Cole. I'm part-time at Petals and Green. They sent me with this delivery. Know why my father picked you? I didn't even know he was your dad. She stared at him for a while, That isn't an answer. 3 years ago I met a man. Dominic began carefully. I stopped and helped him when his car broke down. He was generous afterward. I never knew his name then and never found it out later either. That is honestly all I know about it. Little Levi, silent this whole time, suddenly chimed in with the tiny matter-of-fact of a kid sharing plain truth. My dad never opens other people's mail, the boy stated. Even when we really need money, he just doesn't. The whole lobby went absolutely still. Violet stared down at the child. An emotion flashed in her eyes, not pity but a sudden sharp recognition. The tough CEO hadn't shed a tear in her own corporate lobby in years. And she wasn't about to start now. Yet something about the pure, innocent truth in that little boy's defense. The way he offered it without any scheme behind it hit her harder than she ever expected. Connor Blake sharply cut the tension. The board meets in 2 hours. We can't let. Hannah, Violet interrupted. Please escort Mr. Cole and his boy somewhere comfortable to sit, away from the lobby. She turned to Dominic. I need to speak with you before you go. Connor clenched his jaw and said nothing. Giving a single nod, Dominic gripped the bouquet and followed Hannah toward the elevators, Levi right beside him. The kid's hand was buried back in his pocket with his toy car. Hannah brought them up to a quiet fourth-floor waiting area, a cozy space filled with genuinely nice chairs. It had a side table for coffee and a wide view of the rainy city below. Hannah handed little Levi some juice, a notepad, and a pen to keep him completely busy. The boy immediately started sketching trucks with deep, quiet focus. He placed his toy car right on the table, treating it like a reference model. 20 minutes later, Violet walked in. She took a seat across from Dominic, placing the folded letter right between them. Tell me about the night you met my dad, she urged. Dominic stayed silent a moment. Let's watch him recall this. He faced hard memories head-on, no wincing but no dwelling either. He clearly remembered the pouring rain. He recalled the utter terror of Levi running a fever of 103. He was racing toward the urgent care clinic when he spotted a car jammed awkwardly against the curb on Hadley Road. Hazard lights flashing away. The older driver was gray-haired and dressed nicely. He'd stepped out to inspect the bumper, standing right there in the freezing downpour without a jacket. No one was physically hurt. The vehicle smacked the curb hard, blowing a tire and killing the engine, but the elderly man was unharmed. Dominic realized the guy was simply shaken up. Rattled in that quiet way older folks get, where they look perfectly calm outside but really aren't. Dominic pulled over. He didn't really want to stop. Most of us would keep driving. His boy was sick, rain flying sideways, but Dominic still pulled over. He dialed up roadside assistance. Watched closely, he guided the man back inside the car, escaping the heavy rain. He then offered his own jacket. The vehicle was freezing, taking too long to heat up, and the poor guy was trembling violently, holding his son tight in the back seat. He just sat there quietly, watching the road through the windshield until the tow truck finally showed up. During the wait, he phoned the urgent care center, letting them know they were running late. Through the glass, he kept talking to the old man. A simple, comforting voice, soothing but never talking down to him. That exact steady, patient rhythm he used when his boy got scared during thunderstorms. Once the tow truck appeared, he stepped out to help the driver securely attach the vehicle. Then he directed a couple lanes of busy traffic, keeping everything flowing smoothly around them. He never overthought his kindness. The weather was awful and someone just needed a hand. Right before the truck pulled away, the stranger grabbed his hand. Holding on tight with both hands, he delivered a message that hung in the air. One day, what you are will come back to you. At the time, Dominic figured it was just simple gratitude. Those heavy words shaken people use when trying to offer comfort equal to the deep relief they feel inside. Over the years, that moment flashed through his mind, but he never expected anything in return. He never told me his name, Dominic simply finished. I never asked. Violet stayed completely frozen during his story. Staring down at that handwritten card, she whispered, "He tracked you down later." "I know my dad," she continued. "He would have absolutely found you. He possessed this quiet talent for locating the people who truly mattered. I never heard from him, but that doesn't mean he stopped searching." A pause. "You mentioned working in corporate logistics earlier." Dominic shifted in his seat. "Operations engineering. handling supply chain route analysis for a regional freight firm. Spent 5 years in that sector. She pressed, "Why did you walk away?" A brief silence hung between them. I couldn't stomach the fabricated reports. Could you be more specific? They wanted my signature on a performance audit I knew was completely falsified. It wildly exaggerated the success metrics of a major cold chain delivery route. After my hard refusal, things at the office got incredibly hostile. So I quit. Violet stared back. Her harsh features suddenly sharpened into pure, unblinking focus. You know that look. The exact moment someone realizes the conversation taking place is about something entirely different. Which company? Meridian Freight Solutions. A major logistics subcontractor running routes through the Mid-Atlantic corridor. He hesitated. Some of those supply lines fed directly into your network. The silence in the room suddenly shifted entirely. Just then, Hannah knocked once, pushing the door open immediately. Her face remained perfectly professional, but a deep, frantic urgency burned right beneath the surface. I dug up a filed audit from 3 years ago, she whispered. It's buried in our archived compliance logs. Someone actually signed the official refusal. Deep down, the CEO already knew exactly whose name it was. She locked eyes with Dominic. He simply stared right back. We see this sometimes, that quiet calm of a man who accepted years ago that honesty costs more than it pays. The document flagged a massive structural flaw in our entire corporate network, Hannah confirmed. If only that tiny gap had been fixed back then. We could have stopped 14 months of corporate fraud before the damage compounded. She paused. That report was buried deep, but by who? Violet asked. Hannah merely glanced toward the door. By the exact same person pitching the financial projections to the board of directors. Little Levi looked up from his drawing. He was listening the way young kids do. Sensing a heavy shift in the room, even if the financial jargon flew right past him. Putting down his small pen, he stared up at Dominic. Dad, he whispered, if they dismiss you, do we have to say sorry for bringing flowers? Dominic reached over, resting a gentle, reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. Never, buddy. We always tell the truth. What others do with that truth is entirely up to them. Violet studied the child in quiet silence. Then she slowly stood up. Let's watch the board meeting convene at 11 inside the 36th floor conference room. 12 executives sat around the massive table. Most were much older than Violet. Every single eye was locked onto the glowing corporate presentation displayed at the far end of the room, staring with that fierce pinpoint focus people show when told a crisis is highly urgent. Connor Blake stood tall at the front, delivering his words with the smooth, unhurried confidence of a man who heavily rehearsed this moment. He arranged the financial data sequentially: route losses, margin compression, debt service fees, and supply chain penalties. He slowly built his case, much like a house constructed deliberately to leave you only one small door. And that single door was a partial operational sale to a firm called Arcturus Capital Partners. A few directors were subtly nodding before he even finished speaking. Here is the secret about hard numbers when they come from someone suave, well-dressed, and dominating the room. They easily generate a subtle, almost hypnotic wave of total agreement. Violet quietly let him finish. Then she finally spoke up. I am bringing someone else in. Connor frowned. The decision timeline. I am fully aware of the timeline. I need 15 minutes. Her tone made it clear this wasn't a tiny request. Dominic stepped inside wearing a damp jacket while young Levi sat safely in the glass-walled hallway outside, clearly visible through the glass, quietly drawing on the little notepad Hannah provided. That simple white bouquet now rested quietly on the credenza against the far wall. 12 corporate elites stared directly at Dominic. They looked at him like a small, glaring error that simply did not belong in their pristine room. Connor Blake smiled rather pleasantly. Is the flower delivery guy consulting on our corporate financial structure now? Dominic just stared at the screen. You and I know how childhood streets feel familiar, not from intense study but from living them. That's exactly how Dominic recognized this intricate financial data. They simply become a deep, ingrained part of how you move through the world. He instantly knew the tiny route codes. He knew the timeline. He immediately saw something hidden deep in the spreadsheet's structure. A tiny but devastating falsification. The exact same accounting trick he last saw 3 years ago on a document that completely ruined his former career. Those specific loss categories in columns 8 through 11, he stated quietly. They are all secretly funneled through one single third-party carrier. The truth was simple. That carrier lacked the fleet required. Those specific routes at the massive volumes shown. A silver-haired board member, Margaret Ashby, made a tiny telling gesture. She leaned in. How could you know? Because I built this freight network. I know exactly what those fleets can and cannot haul. The numbers displayed are physically impossible. Their operational fleet size back then couldn't handle that massive cargo. Connor snapped, You lack current access. I'm not discussing today. I'm pointing right at the dates on your own document. Dominic took a slow step toward the screen, March to August 3 years back. In that exact time frame, they'd need triple their actual capacity to run those build routes, yet every invoice was fully paid. Which leaves two options. Either they hid unregistered assets, which someone would absolutely catch, or those operating costs were entirely faked, assigned to these specific routes just to mask a massive logistics fraud. A heavy telling silence fell. Connor smoothly dismissed the analysis as interesting, but noted it came from someone lacking authority. Someone with no active credentials or access to verified data. I secured the camera logs, Violet stated calmly. Hannah. With a swift motion, Hannah synced her tablet to the monitor. Watch closely now. The screen split, revealing Connor's presented billing records. The other side showed warehouse exit logs from a regional hub, the exact center tied to those heavy financial losses. On the very dates matching those massive invoices, security logs recorded absolutely zero outbound freight. The trucks literally never moved, yet massive operational costs registered. Margaret Ashby spoke barely above a whisper, Pull up their registration and fleet records. Up front, Connor went perfectly rigid, the smallest micro-expression of panic. Through the glass, little Levi paused his drawing. He noticed every single powerful executive inside staring right at his dad. He just quietly watched them. Then he gently lowered his pen, grabbing his toy car. He clutched it tight, a tiny, profound anchor for a moment he knew he absolutely couldn't miss. You and I know how time warps. 2 hours vanished in just 15 frantic minutes. Grace Whitman, summoned earlier by Violet, finally stepped from the waiting room. She carried a leather briefcase and the steady, practiced composure of someone entirely comfortable inside ruthless corporate boardrooms. She slowly revealed the hidden contents secured from Charles Sterling's private office. A simple little flash drive. A tightly sealed folder filled with printed private communications. And crucially, a fragile handwritten timeline Charles quietly pieced together during the final 18 months of his life, meticulously tracking bizarre anomalies inside the corporate freight network, a logistics puzzle he couldn't quite solve before his health rapidly declined. The tiny drive held emails, and those messages exposed numbers. Numbers perfectly matching what Dominic just uncovered in the billing discrepancy. That entire thread of digital communications linked back to one account under one solitary name. Connor Blake slipped out before the board meeting even officially ended. He moved with the stiff, controlled speed of a guilty man, knowing his escape window was open but wouldn't be for much longer. 2 tense board members quickly shadowed him into the hallway. Heated voices echoed briefly, then died completely. You see the truth, Land. Margaret looked from Violet directly to Dominic. You and I know small words carry weight. Your father missed nothing, she whispered. Violet stared at those simple white flowers. Yes, she replied, he always was. 3 hours passed before Violet finally spotted Dominic waiting down in the lobby. The exact same room where she had coldly ordered security to throw him out. Where her staff had judged a damp jacket, worn shoes, and a tired child, blindly deciding exactly what kind of man stood right before them. He stood quietly by the glass doors, little Levi fast asleep against his shoulder. A tiny toy car still clutched tightly in the sleeping boy's hand. Dominic stood perfectly still, watching the heavy rain hit the glass. He heard the sharp click of her heels on the cold marble, but didn't turn. He just waited. She stepped up right beside him. For a quiet moment, they both just watched the storm. I owe you an apology, she said softly. You don't have to, I do. And I need to do it right. She finally turned to look at him. Nearby staff could hear every word, but she simply didn't care anymore. I judged you on everything that simply did not matter. Your wet jacket, your delivery job. The fact you walked in holding a child, while everyone else who enters this building brings a shiny badge and a firm handshake. I made a fast, lazy choice and I was completely wrong. Dominic turned to look at her. His face wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It offered no cheap, easy forgiveness. It was a much steadier look. I accept that, he told her quietly. But the apology you owe me is the very smallest one on your list. The heavier debt belongs to the very next person in a cheap coat who walks in here with something genuine to say, only to be tossed out because they just don't look expensive enough. Whatever you fix today, start right there. Violet stood completely speechless. He gently adjusted the boy. Levi shifted a little but stayed deeply asleep. I have to get him home. He hasn't had anything to eat all day. I want to offer you a real role, Violet said. We will correct your official file. That security report will be fixed to show the honest truth of what actually happened. And I want to hire you directly as an independent operations consultant. You'll fix the supply chain and we'll pay your true worth. I appreciate the offer. You sound like you're going to turn it down. Let's look closely here. He gave her an incredibly careful, guarded stare. I am going to say, not yet. I need time to decide if I even want to return to this corporate life and exactly what that looks like. Hearing the talking, little Levi finally stirred awake, blinking slowly. He stared groggily at Violet, looked up at his dad, then scanned the massive lobby, slowly remembering his surroundings. He rubbed his tired eyes, still clutching that tiny plastic toy car. Are we done here? He mumbled. Yes, Dominic softly replied. We are going home. Levi stared right at Violet with that pure, brutal honesty of a child who hasn't learned how to hide their thoughts. If the old man sent those flowers and completely trusted my dad, Levi said, then maybe you should try trusting him too. Violet stared silently at the boy. Her expression softened, shifting just like a dusty window when the morning sunlight finally hits it. She turned her eyes to Dominic. You and I know that look. He watched his boy, exhausted yet full of quiet pride. I will think about it, she whispered. Yeah, muttered Levi, already leaning safely against his dad. That is what my dad always says when he means yes. Let us step into the office that evening. Violet finally finished reading her father's letter. She and Grace decoded the opening lines earlier, the few paragraphs exposing Connor's massive corporate fraud. The tiny details uncovered those buried financial reports, proving exactly what her father had feared and eventually confirmed. But there was another section, penned delicately in a completely different ink. The small pen strokes looked painfully shaky, just like his fading handwriting during those final painful months. The note read, I spent my whole life in boardrooms just like the one you sit in today, and I want to share the single most valuable lesson I ever took away from those places. The people who actually protect this business are rarely the ones shouting the loudest at the table. They are the quiet ones who simply say no even when it ruins their careers. And then they humbly go home and feed their kids anyway. I met a man like that on a dark, rainy road. I was terrified and he handed me his coat without even asking for my name. A small gesture like that is rarer than anything we sell. He wrote, those simple white flowers do not mean what you think they mean. Your mother absolutely adored those blooms before our family fell apart. I mailed them every single year, not to beg for your forgiveness, but as a tiny reminder that love stays real even when it deeply hurts. You stopped accepting the deliveries because the pain blinded you entirely. I completely understand. I just ask that you try again. The note continued, if Dominic Cole personally carried that bouquet to you, two things are certain. First, my worst fear has finally come true. The company is currently facing a massive real threat. Second, it proves that after all these years, he remains the decent, honest man I met that night. Trust him. You have ignored the subtle signs of goodness for too long. Violet slowly set the paper down. She sank into her father's worn chair, staring at those fragile white flowers resting quietly in a windowsill vase left by her loyal assistant earlier that evening. The heavy rain had vanished. Outside, the washed city streets gleamed against the dark sky, wrapped in a profound stillness. She finally wept, no dramatic sobbing, just a very small release. Just a quiet, invisible grief triggered entirely by a few handwritten words. The heartbreak that hits when a tiny, overlooked truth finally clicks into place. We all know that feeling, wondering if grasping the truth late is somehow worse. Downstairs, Mason Reed caught up with Dominic in the empty lobby to stop him. The tough security guard persona was gone. He was just a vulnerable guy, awkwardly fidgeting with his hands, desperately trying to convey a small but important apology without knowing exactly how. "I was completely out of line this morning," Mason quietly admitted. "I blindly followed my corporate orders. I never once stopped to consider your little boy." "I really should have." Dominic adjusted his worn bag. "I appreciate you saying that. A simple apology does not magically fix what happened. It does not have to. It just needs to be genuine." Dominic took a breath. "My boy is 6. He absorbs every little detail. He watched this massive building reject his father today. That tiny moment of disrespect will stay buried inside his heart for years. I do not blame you for following orders. But if you truly mean this apology, remember his face the next time a hard-working man walks in wearing the wrong shoes." Mason nodded. "Sometimes one small handshake means everything." Dominic walked out into the night. "Look closely with me." 3 months later, Sterling Group changed in quiet ways, but staff felt it instantly. That old compliance report Dominic originally filed 3 years ago was finally brought back with a clear note stating its past suppression came from intentional corporate cover-ups. Connor Blake was now under investigation. Outside investors got the word the big buyout terms needed total renegotiation. 2 board members deeply tied to Connor's old agenda quietly stepped down. The new internal rules on whistleblower complaints were completely rewritten by legal into policies with real teeth. Every formal grievance now demanded full documented review within 30 days and a direct written reply to the employee filing it. Violet personally presented these updates to everyone, taking staff questions for 40 straight minutes. A tiny gesture of transparency, yet something a Sterling CEO had never done before. Dominic took the new consulting gig. He came in twice a week, working 2 floors right below Violet's suite. He just wanted a quiet room with good sunlight. Those simple conditions were his only demands. He stuck to wearing the exact same casual clothes as always. On school breaks, he brought Levi along. The boy sat quietly sketching, never making a single peep. His old professional record was cleared. Barely 6 weeks after that fix, 3 old coworkers reached out offering jobs. He politely passed on 2, weighing the third one very carefully because he already knew the heavy price of making a blind choice the first time and wasn't about to repeat that painful mistake. He kept picking up shifts at Petals and Green, since Marcus still needed his help. And honestly, Dominic still found simple comfort in that damp, earthy smell early every morning. The way the crisp chill mingled with fresh stems, creating a scent somewhere between expensive perfume and wet earth. You and I know that feeling, the pure promise of a brand new day. Come spring, Violet ordered a beautiful, modest replanting of the company's ground-floor terrace garden. She lined the edges with white blooms, finally done pretending she despised that subtle color. They framed this little garden update as a gentle memorial for Charles Sterling. So she hosted a quiet Saturday morning gathering there, intimate, stripped of all corporate gloss. Grace Whitman, Hannah, and the few loyal board members who survived those brutal months, plus a small handful of humble staff who once worked for her dad. She invited Dominic and little Levi. The kid dressed himself that day, wearing a slightly oversized button-down shirt and his freshest sneakers. He kept a toy car safely tucked in his pocket, a tiny non-negotiable comfort item. The second they stepped onto the terrace, Levi stared right at those delicate white blossoms lining the path. Then he spotted the center table. You and I know what sat there. A thick white bouquet carefully bound with blue ribbon. Violet stood quietly beside the table. She wore clothes much softer than her usual executive style, less corporate armor, more breathing human. Her eyes moved slowly from Dominic down to Levi, resting on those simple flowers. The boy gazed up at her, carrying that deep, heavy seriousness only a 6-year-old at a grown-up party possesses. Are you going to keep them this time? Violet gently lifted the bouquet in her hands. Yes, she whispered, catching Dominic's gaze right over the boy's small head. That tiny look wasn't a smile, yet it carried the deepest meaning. It was a deeply quiet moment. You and I know that look well. The face of someone finally dropping their armor for a risk worth taking. This time, the tiny handwritten note came first. Dominic reached down, gently taking his son's small hand. The little boy followed happily, a plastic toy car clutched tightly in his other fist. The hard-working single father had written the plain note himself, tucking it into the fresh bouquet's ribbon just like that fateful first delivery. The brief message simply read, "Kindness does not always arrive when it is ready. But when it is finally seen, it changes the shape of every room it enters." The CEO carefully laid the flowers by a framed picture of her father, a portrait Grace helped pick. An image captured long before the massive corporation grew too big and wore him down. A simple shot showing him laughing at something just off-screen. A glimpse of the warm man she sometimes forgot he used to be. She lingered there silently, resting one hand softly on the edge of the wooden frame. Across the terrace, Dominic observed her from afar, giving her space, never pushing it. Not walking away either, just quietly present in that steady, grounding way of his. You see, that quiet presence was his most enduring, remarkable gift. He was no longer just the guy delivering corporate flowers. He was more than the person who accidentally uncovered a fraud. And he was not quite yet whatever he was slowly becoming to her right now. He was a devoted father, teaching his boy to speak hard truths even when it cost them dearly, and who somehow, defying the bleak logic of a rainy Tuesday morning, found his way to the one place his honest gesture mattered. A small tug on his hand. "Can we get some lunch?" The little boy whispered. "Yes," Dominic answered softly. "Something hot?" "Something hot." Levi nodded, completely satisfied. He slipped the tiny toy car back inside his pocket. The spring sun was pushing through the clouds above them, hesitant, entirely honest, and beautifully, perfectly clear. Violet never called Dominic the flower delivery guy after that day. She saw him for what he was, the man honoring her late father's final promise. And maybe, just maybe, moving very cautiously. We can see it now. Two guarded people, deeply aware of the cost, quietly building something far more meaningful.